Hello, teachers. We have made it to the end of the year. My wonderful friend Shirley doesn't call this next period of time vacation. She calls it recovery time. And it is truly my hope that each of us will be able to find time this summer for self-care and things that renew our spirits and our bodies so that we will come to the fall refreshed. I have two goals for our time together today. One is to introduce you to one of what I think is the most important books in our field at this time, and then to talk about some read aloud ideas. The book is The Book Whisperer by Donalyn Miller. And if this is new to you, let me tell you that this book will do one of two things when you read it. It will either affirm what you have always known about literacy or change entirely the way you view literacy. Either way, it's a win. It's a very pleasant read with many examples from the classroom. It's not going to feel like an academic book, but yet you will learn more from this book than you probably did in your reading methods course in college. I don't know if you know what the average number of books that Americans read per year is. It's 4, with 25% of Americans reading 0 books. Oh, but we're teachers. That's not true for us. Donalyn Miller tells us that 54.3% of teachers are unenthusiastic readers. And if that's you, it's okay. We love you. But we would like to encourage you this summer to fall in love with reading. For how can we help our students fall in love with reading if we ourselves are not in love with reading? It always concerns me when reading curriculum is the cornerstone of a language arts program. Textbooks. You know, I have a reading textbook in my classroom. And are all the stories in that reading textbook wonderful? Frankly, they are. They are all taken from quality literature, every single one. But we only read 3 of those stories this year because spending hours and hours in a textbook, I don't believe is a way for students to fall in love with reading. How do students fall in love with reading? In books. And so that is what should be the cornerstone of our literature programs. But then there are people who say things like, well, the traditional methods work. My students are growing in comprehension and they're becoming capable readers. But are they falling in love with reading in those methods? It's in the books where students become lifelong readers, and that's what we need them to be. There is no teacher who would ever not care whether the students were doing independent reading. Of course not. But what happens is we can become overwhelmed with the standards and curriculum that we must cover. So the question can't be, how do I find time to have my students do independent reading? The question needs to be, how can I not find the time for them to do independent reading? And it's frightening to realize that our developing readers are the ones who are reading the very least in school. They need to be reading the very most. From Donalyn Miller, I learned the 40 books per year concept, and almost all of my students far and above surpassed the 40 books. But let me tell you about Lucas, who came to me in March one year and said, Mrs. Matsuda, I'm really worried. I don't think I'm going to make it to 40 books. And I said, well, what are you on now? It was March. And he said, I'm on 17. And I said, well, how many did you read last year? And he said, I think 10. And I said, well, Lucas, are you failing or succeeding? He really didn't know what to say. I said, think about it. He says, succeeding? I said, you've almost doubled what you read last year and it's only March. Yes, you are succeeding. Just keep going. When our students read, though, we need to make sure when they're reading literature that we don't suck the life out of those books. Let me share with you Donalyn's first experience with literacy. She calls this her wake-up call. It was the summer before her first teaching assignment, and she wanted to have the students do a unit of The View from Saturday by E.L. Konigsberg. And she describes what a beautiful book this is and why she wanted it to be a part of her students' school year. So she read the book again, and in the margins of her copy made careful notes of conversational points to discuss. I created extension activities that tied in with the events of the book's plot. We would investigate the migration habits of turtles, host tea parties, write calligraphy, discuss the main characters' cultural differences. I crafted leveled comprehension questions for each of the book's chapters, going from all the domains of Bloom's taxonomy. I mean, have we all not done this? Just as I had learned in my college methods courses, I selected key vocabulary that I felt students should know. We would make our own crossword puzzles. The unit was a work of art, a culmination of everything I had learned about good teaching, and I was proud of it. It was a disaster. I've done this. I've done this so many times. I don't do it anymore. She writes about a student who hurried through all the unit activities and said, "I'm done with my work. May I read my book now?" We need to make sure that our reading program doesn't look like this. Read, answer, assess, repeat. Do we need activities? Can we provide activities for our students that increase enrichment? Of course, but let's not suck the life out of our books. I hope you will enjoy The Book Whisperer. I have read this book multiple times. I have purchased it multiple times and annotated every time I read, but I can't seem to keep the book on my shelves. I pass it out and often don't get it back, and I think it's because people fall in love with it and they want to keep it for their own. I even include this book now in my, well, for several years now, I've included it in my required reading for my university students in their college reading methods course. I wish you and me had this when we were going through our programs. The Book Whisperer. If you read it, will you let me know? Will you comment and let me know? I would love to hear what you think of it. Now for Read Aloud. I think we all know the value of Read Aloud. It is our favorite time of the day, teachers and students, but I thought it might be helpful for you to get some ideas of some new read alouds perhaps. I want to start with the very first one. I start with On the First Day of School. This is not a book that will change lives, but it is a book that changed lives because it turns readers, even non-readers, even our developing readers, into readers. It's not by a children's author. It's by an adult comedian, Dave Barry. It's called The Worst Class Trip Ever. It's about an 8th grade group who goes to DC for their 8th grade trip. Let me tell you about Josh. Josh announced to me on the first day of school several years ago, "I don't read. I hate reading." I said, okay. So we started with Read Aloud that day, and the students were captivated. Josh, by day 2, was at the edge of his seat, literally. But Josh's aunt was getting married in Texas, and so he had to leave for a week of school. And when he came back, he said, "What's happening in that book about the trip?" And I said, "I'm not going to tell you. Here, read it and catch up." And from that day on, Josh became a reader. So it does change lives. It's so funny. The kids absolutely love it. But I would suggest you read it this summer if you're planning to do it as a read aloud, because there is some potty humor. You know, Dave Barry is he's an adult comedian. So I just eliminate those and no one ever misses it. And I change some of the terminology, like from hot girls to pretty girls. I just feel more comfortable with that. Dave Barry is one of those authors who will email you back immediately if you email him. And I even have my students emailing him. So he's great fun. He's written a sequel to it called The Worst Night Ever. I have to have multiple copies of both of these books because without fail, the moment I finish this, the students are all wanting to read it. Can I have a copy? And I always have a few copies so that they can follow along when I'm reading. The next book you don't need to preview this summer. If you trust me, you can just trust me to read it. Restart. Oh, I forgot. He's also written a Christmas book called The Shepherd, the Angel, and Walter the Christmas Dog. I'll talk about this book a little bit more at Christmas time this year, but it's even public school friendly, and your students will love this book. But if you want, you might want to read it this summer. So here's my second read aloud. It's by Gordon Korman, and I honestly have never read anything by him that I haven't absolutely fallen in love with. He was published by Scholastic Publishing at age 14, and he's been writing ever since. But in Restart, Chase Ambrose, big old meanie head, falls off the roof of his house, gets a concussion that is so bad that causes complete amnesia, and he has an opportunity to restart. They cannot get enough of this book. I bought all of the copies of it in the Inland Empire. I think I have 8 of them now, and I was still every day, can I have a copy? Can I have a copy? Josiah organized the class as soon as it was finished to write a sequel. So he organized his friends to each take chapters, and they've had great fun. That's been a year-long project for them. So you don't have to read it this summer, but do read it for your class next year if you're looking for a read aloud book. I've already shared Banned This Book with you on a previous video, so that has been a read aloud for us this year. I don't know if you know about Front Desk. This is not a read aloud for me, but it's simply because we don't have enough school days. It is a beautiful book by Kelly Yang, and it explores the plight of Chinese immigrants and how they are exploited so often. And it is very much a true story. There's even a picture of her as a young girl about the time that this book was taking place. It is fantastic. If we had one more month of school, this would be on my read aloud list. This is a book that will become on my read aloud list for the first time next year. It started a couple years ago as a dear book, and it went wild in my classroom. This year I used it with small guided reading groups, but not everybody got to read it. And my students have actually insisted that I make this a read aloud book for next year. And so I said, well, I don't have enough time. What can I remove? And so I gave them my read aloud list, and oh, well, you can't remove that. No, we need all these. So I guess you can't. But I have been I'm ending the year with Ungifted by Gordon Corman, and it's just a little advanced for my group. They love it, but I think it's more suited for 6th grade. So next year I'm going to replace Ungifted and do Out of My Mind by Sharon Draper, who is a high school English teacher. It's about a little girl, Bellity, who has severe cerebral palsy, but her brain is nothing like her body. And it is an important book for us all to read. I have to warn you, the teachers will disappoint you in this book. They are not who you hope that they would be, but I think it's a good lesson for our students to see that we are very much human. My students have no question about my humanity, but maybe some of your students question some of your humanity. And this is not a read aloud series in my classroom, but it's a dear book that I just have to share with you this series because the students independently formed a book club, and I had to buy so many copies of it that I have to share it with you. It's by Buyea, the Mr. Terupt series. This is book 1. This is book 2. Mr. Terupt falls again. He falls in a different way in book 2. In book 3, we have to save Mr. Terupt, and the students work very hard to save him. And book 4, which just came out, because the students of America insisted that Buyea write one more, is called Goodbye, Mr. Terupt. So introduce yourself to this series this summer. I think you will really enjoy that. I didn't give you all of my read aloud list because as a 4th grade teacher, of course, I have to do By the Great Horn Spoon, About Gold Rush, and Island of the Blue Dolphins. But, you know, everyone knows about those. I was trying to share with you some perhaps new read alouds for you. Linda, one of our YouTube family members, made a comment a couple months ago, and it made me so happy. She said, "Have you read The House of 60 Fathers yet? It's our current read aloud in 6th to 8th grade class. Reading aloud is the best," in all caps, part of the teaching day. And Linda's comment gave me the idea, wouldn't it be incredible if we could make suggestions to each other this summer? I know many of you feel hesitant to comment, but if you're a student, if you're a teacher, if you're neither of those two, but you have a book that you think we teachers should read, would you take the time to make a comment, and we could make a list of of new read alouds, because we all know there's only so many hours in the day to read, and how we can help each other, I think would be so much fun. When Linda sent that suggestion to me, I was just thrilled, and we need to keep that list going. This is the last video that I'm going to do for this school year. I may do some intermittently in the summer if I get an idea, but I'm planning to take a break from the weekly videos, and then I'll start again at the beginning of August with some of the things that I do at the beginning of the year, and then hopefully we'll have another year together. But I wanted to take this time to just genuinely say thank you for, I think we've made 29 videos now, and thank you for spending this time together. It has meant the world and all to me, and I hope that we have all grown, and I hope that we can continue to grow together, because we can't do it on our own, can we? Teaching is overwhelming, but when we can support each other, the possibilities are endless. So I'm going to close today with 2 quotes about reading. The first one from an unknown source who says, "A child who reads will be an adult who thinks." And when have we ever needed thinking adults more than now? And a Japanese author, Haruki Murakami, who writes, "If you only read the books that everyone else is reading, you can only think what everyone else is thinking." So let's work together to help our students to be readers, to help them be thinkers. And I look forward to our time together again in a couple months. And I wish you safety, and I wish you a happy recovery. Goodbye. I'll see you soon.